into Star Trek while by reviewing a random episode. And I'm the Dead Man, and welcome to the channel, The Grateful Trek. Um, so today's episode is from TNG, Season 1, Episode 13, DataLore. And anybody that's watched the TNG knows this one. It's a very famous or infamous one. And it starts off with a captain's log, and they are heading to a planet called Omicron Theta, which is Data's home planet. And in Data's quarters, he's practicing sneezing. And when Wesley Crusher walks in to inform him that they've arrived at the planet and ask him if he has a cold, and he questions what a cold is, and Wesley replies that his mom had told him that it was a disease humans used to get long ago. So this basically indicates that at this point in the future, humanity has eradicated the common cold. So Wesley asks him if he's interested in seeing his home planet, or if he's excited, and he says there's different levels of interest, and that right now he's interested in perfecting sneezing, which he can't quite do. And it's a kind of a humorous moment. So they when they arrive to the planet, they scan the planet, and basically there's no. It's a class. They say, I think Tasha says that it's a Class M planet, but there's no signs of life, no vegetation, and they're talking with Data, and Data says that he holds the memory of 411 colonists that were on this planet, and the entire colony had disappeared. And Riker says that Starfleet wants to know why the colony disappeared, and that's basically the teaser. So they're set down. They're set to beam down, and Picard expressed interest in going on the away mission himself, but mentions that his number one, his first officer, would not approve of that, and because it would put the captain in danger. And he's expressed this earlier in the season. I believe it might have been the second part of Encounter at Farpoint, or maybe it was some other earlier episode. But so they beam down, and they're scanning. They're using their tricorders, scanning, and again mentioned that it's a completely dead world. No insects, not even bacteria. And they're scanning the Geordies with them. They're scanning the what used to be a field. He says that maybe it was like 20 or 30 years ago. And Data mentions that he was found on this planet around 26 years prior. So 26 years ago is when they found Data. And Michelle Fairy Tales is here, says hello. Hello. Um, so Data, rewatching this and comparing it to current Star Trek, um, where you have a sentient hologram that grew up, or sorry, there's a colony of holograms, which there's precedent for that in Deep Space Nine, where they all live. They're not aware that they're holograms until one of them goes missing or something, and Dax figures out that they're all holograms and kind of they start going missing, and she reprograms the whole system. I guess it was built by one man who is an actual humanoid. But in Starfleet Academy, there's a colony of holograms that created a new hologram that is is part of Starfleet Academy now, and it's not the combat girl, but you could easily confuse her with the combat girl, the one that was running around the ship screaming "Red alert! Red alert!" Uh, no, she's the hologram girl that when she's thrown into water, air bubbles come up as if she breathes oxygen. Now, obviously, you could explain a lot of that away with technobabble and blah blah blah. Why am I bringing this up? Because this hologram girl is programmed to be like, I think the doctor says like 19 or 20 or something like that. And Data was found 26 years ago, meaning he was activated about 26 years prior. So he's like in his near 30s and does not act like a bumbling idiot, does not act like a 12-year-old. Obviously, he's been programmed with a lot of, a lot of information, more than the humans even know on the show. And uh, he's had time to interact with humans and sort of about learn their ways. This hologram girl, I guess, is a basically a newborn. So some you could forgive some of her the way she acts, um, but when you compare today's Star Trek and the way they write the characters and the way the characters act and interact with other characters, um, it's not very believable, for one, and it makes them all look okay. They're simultaneously geniuses in their whatever field they're in. At the same time, immature teenagers in like high school, compared to Data, who is essentially a child in a way, but acts like an adult. And that's why I brought that up, because um, obviously when this came out, we were just first learning about Data, and the only comparable character at that time would be Spock, who have similar traits. And Spock acted like an adult. Where we see new Spock, he too acts like a teenager at times. Uh, And I will grant Ethan Peck, the actor, I will grant that it's not entirely his fault. It's the writer's fault, and there are times when he's playing Spock in a serious manner, he gets a lot of the Nimoy isms uh, pretty well. But enough about that. So the colonists, um, so they're in like this cave with, which the colonists were hiding, and Geordi points out that it looks like they made it um, look like a natural cave in order to hide from something. And then he pushes on the cave wall. Hello, DJ Play Nice. He pushes on the cave wall and a door opens, and there's like this secret underground building. And this chamber, hidden chamber. And there's no life readings. When they enter the chamber, there's another door, and it has like alien writing on the door, and that's something that I miss in modern science fiction today. We don't see it as much. They try to throw it in every once in a while on on New Trek, but it's mostly everything's in English, and they tried to do a little bit of Klingon writing or whatever. But you see that a lot in TNG, Deep Space Nine, 90s Trek, where you see, and it's just those little details, paying attention to details makes it more believable that this is an alien planet and not just the back lot of Paramount Studios. Even though it's clearly a set, but they do things to try to make it look differently. So we see, so then we see drawings, like children's drawings, what looks to be stick figures and stuff, and like this snowflake looking thing, and the people that are scared of it, and they mentioned that that looks like they might be scared of something, and of course they've been hiding here, and then they figure out that this is Dr. Noonien Soong's lab, and they don't quite know yet that he was the one that created Data. And then Riker finds like this tube looking thing, opens it up, and there's like these molds that perfectly fit Data's face. So it basically is a mold of Data. And then Worf and Tasha Yar are sent off to like investigate the rest of the compound. Then Geordi's inspecting another room inside the lab, which there's like a fog covering up what's inside. There's like a glass door, but we can't see inside. And then we get a some sort of. So Geordi says it's some sort of storage area. So I don't know if this is the first some sort of in TNG, but it's a very, very early on some sort of. And I don't think we've done a some sort of in a while. It's been a while since we gotten a some sort of. Data opens the storage area, and there's parts that look like Data, and they're just disassembled Data parts. And he says that it looks like it's another him or perhaps a brother. And there's a mention when they mentioned Dr. Noonien Soong. They talk about his experiments with the positronic brain, and I think Yar even mentions like Einstein. I don't know. She mentions a famous scientist that I can't remember which one she said. Uh, but I got to thinking about how, um, you know, during TNG, we were kind of led to believe that Data was like the only android or the first android or whatever. But we know that's not true because in TOS there's Harry Mudd's androids. There's um, Dr. Kirby turns himself into an android, or you know, transfers his consciousness or whatever. And there's other androids from other alien species that are created. So it's not the first android, but I guess it's the first android with a positronic brain, and that's what makes the difference. And maybe that's why those androids are less sophisticated, especially like Harry Mudd's androids are less sophisticated. And a lot of TOS was be wary of, technology that could replace humans and stuff. Um, so it's interesting here that they were kind of exploring Data and him wanting to be more human. Of course, later on in Picard, we see a lot of different. They kind of ruined that idea, but initially, that sort of made me think. Okay, the positronic brain is unique to Dr. Soong and his invention, and that's what makes the difference between the TOS androids, which we never see again, and it's not like we see a whole society of androids until later in Picard. So then, um, back on the so they want Data wants to take the parts and put it together and see if it comes alive. And Riker's not sure about that, but this is the Data's like only other counterpart, you know. So Riker agrees to bring it back to the ship, and they start working on it in engineering. And then Data's kind of like overlooking the situation, monitoring the situation, and we get the name of the chief engineer, whose name is Mr. Argyle. So Chief Engineer Argyle, and he kind of has like a southern accent. So I guess it's the first introduction of him. I think we may have seen him in earlier episodes, but we don't get his name until now. And Data's worried about the whole situation, and Dr. Crusher says that they have top specialists working on it, and that made me think of the line "top men." Uh, so then Riker at so then they have this. They're in the conference, the observation lounge, and it's weird because it's shot from a different angle than we're used to seeing in later episodes. It's shot from the end of the table facing Picard, and then uh, you have Geordi, Riker, and Data. And Data, I think Data standing up while the other one, everyone else is seated. And Riker asks if how things are going, and Data says that they're going well, and that it seems to be an exact copy. And Riker asks about Olive's. All of his other parts are the same. Talking about his dong, right? Right? I think that's what they were trying to do there, right? To which is immediately followed by Jordy saying, and I guess I never caught this before. Will we be able to turn it on? And then that's when Picard stops the speculation conversation and starts a more serious conversation. So I think that seems intentional to me. Not, and I'm not just saying it as looking back. It did. I am saying it as looking back, but in the way that people try to retroactively say, "Oh, he was gay all along" or something like that, and it's like when it clearly wasn't. Oh, he wasn't gay all along or something like that. Whereas this is, I didn't catch that as a kid, and I apparently didn't catch it later on, having watched these episodes in the mid 2000s or late 2000s, 2010s or whatever. So that I thought that was pretty funny. Then Riker hands Picard the drawings of the kid and explains that this is something they were kind of concerned about. They don't know what it is. Um, and then Data is called to engineering by Crusher, to where they need his help because they only know so much about Data and his physiology and stuff like that. So they're doing like a surgery, and or they're preparing to do a surgery, and Data brings Crusher to the side and shows him a type of switch in the back that's sort of like a on and off switch. But what it does is it regulates like his. It's kind of like an alarm clock. He calls it. It regulates his time on and off or something. And then Picard and Riker, as they're doing the surgery, Picard and Riker walk in, and Picard says, or wonders which one was built first, and then that's when Lore wakes up and says that he was, and points to Data. Then says that uh, Data was imperfect, so they created another. They created him to be more perfect, and then then Data and Picard are talking in his ready room about Lore. He says to call me Lore. Uh, they're talking about Lore, and Picard keeps saying it, and Data corrects him and says, "You refer to him as it," and he's like, "Would you do the same to me?" And Picard says, "No, no, I'm sorry. I apologize." And that's it. That's in the late '80s. That's the pronoun conversation. It doesn't go into your face and tell you you're wrong and you should be punished and you're a bad person because you didn't use my proper pronouns, and we're gonna do a whole entire episode about that, and then I'm gonna cry about it, and then we're gonna hug, and we're you know and then we're gonna destroy a ship, and all that stuff that you see in modern Trek. It's it's like a 3-second conversation that doesn't point fingers or say one side's wrong and the other side's right, and I'm morally superior to you. It just says, Picard just says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. I apologize," and that's it. That's the end of the conversation. And 10 years ago, I would probably wouldn't even pointed that out because it wasn't a big deal. But anyway, um, so they talk about lore and how they're basically equally physically. They share the same amount of knowledge, basically. They speak basically the same, and Picard is trying to get at, where do your loyalties lie, and Data stops him before he even gets there and says that my loyalties lie with Starfleet. And then he explains. Then Lore is sitting at the helm, and they're explaining how the helm works to where you have a destination and you say Mark 5 or whatever, and they explain how the 3D space works. And I wish I could explain it the way they explained it on the show, but I thought that was really good for somebody who's because the ship can go in all directions. I think it was good for somebody who's fresh into Star Trek, so it explains how just basic functions of the ship and the physics in the show work without being without a bunch of technobabble and overly explaining and stuff. Just simple directions. Um, that was good. It was really good. I wish I could recite it and go back and recite it the way they did it, but I didn't because I didn't write it down. Then, but at the same time, obviously you're teaching basic navigation, but you don't want to give away, ships, how many torpedoes they're carrying, or what's their shield, what's the code on the shield to take down shields, or something like that. Um, but so Riker does ask him a basic math question. The what is it? The isosceles triangle thing is equal to the other side, or I don't remember. I was never good at math. And he has a little bit of a tick, a little bit of this going on, and Data notices it and basically wants to get him out of Helm and take him to his quarters. And so Data and Lore leave the bridge, and they're walking in the corridor, and Data explains to Lore that he was deceitful about who was created first, that Lore was created first, or he at least suspects as much, and talks about how he was deceitful about how much knowledge he has with the triangle thing that Riker was trying to trick him in. And Lore warns him to not be too jealous. And then they go to his quarters, and Data starts looking up information on Dr. Soong, and that's when Lore starts to tell more, and he says, often wrong Soong is what the colonists called him, because he created Lore, and Lore was too perfect, too much like a human, and they wanted Soong to, and they treated him bad, and he wanted Soong to create an imperfect android, so that it wasn't so much like a human, and that's why they created Data. And then the crystal he talks about the crystal entity, the drawing, and how that entity had came to the colonists, and that's basically what happened. And then Lore is being very he has like a superiority complex, and he thinks he's more superior to humans, um, and he wants to learn more knowledge, and asks Data, wouldn't he want to know more than have the memories of more than just 411 uh, colonists? And it's interesting that they used 411 colonists, because I don't know if you know the story of the missing 411, which is some sort of paranormal like folklore out there amongst like conspiracy theorists and X Files viewers and stuff like that. And Gavin Blackburn is in the house. Hello. Um, I don't know if they chose that in on purpose or if it was just a coincidence, but so he's doing like this tick thing again, right? And ask Data to use his console, uh, if he can use his console, and Data says yes, you can use it, but you must write a full report of what you just told me, um, to Captain Picard. And Laura is sort of mustache twirling at this point, where he's like, I've got all the information that I need. And then you see Lore looks at a panel, and he's taking in all of the information that Starfleet has. And it reminded me of when they Space Seed, when they first find Khan, and Khan lies about who he is, and he's in sick bay, and they give him all the information about Earth and what's happened since he was frozen, and then he absorbs all this information about the Enterprise and stuff like that. So it's a similar thing. Then Lore reports on the crystalline entity and the drawings, and then Lore leaves um, Data's quarters, and they're on the bridge, and they detect this, and he's searching for some similar parts that Data says it would be akin to like looking for an antiseptic or something, but he'll check on it anyway. And he's pouring champagne glasses and tells Data, and you see him spike the champagne glass with this material, this thing that he's got in a vial, and he makes a toast to Data, uh, talking about how drinking champagne was a ancient custom for humans. When a new achievement, when a new achievement is unlocked, to speak in gaming terms. And then Data starts to pass out, and he realizes that he's been drugged, and then he passes out, and then and then Lore toasts to the crystalline entity. He switches clothes with him, and turns Data's off switch off, and then sends a message to the crystal entity, which the Enterprise detects, and they send Wesley to check it out. And Wesley comes in, and Lore is pretending to be Data, and he says something to Wesley and does the tick again, which Wesley notices, and Lore plays it off like he's just pretending to be. He's just trying to get Lore's facial tick down, and then Wesley tells him that he would suspect him of being Lore if he'd have used a contraction because Data can't use contractions. So then he goes back to the bridge, and Dr. Crusher comes up to Wesley and asks specifically what did he say, what did Data say, and he mentioned the off switch, and she finds that suspicious because that was supposed to be something that only she knew about, and Data would not tell it to anybody because earlier in that episode, in that scene, he says, if you had a off switch, wouldn't you keep it a secret? And then she or Data shows up, and she questions him about that, and he basically says he changes his mind. And then the crystalline entity approaches, and Picard says to Yellow Alert, shields up, and sends out all friendly greetings. And then Wesley suspects something's up and starts to speak up, and then there's more twitching, or he switches his twitch with Data's non-twitch. He starts to talk to it. He says that he can talk to the crystalline entity, and there's a conversation between him and Riker, and this is where we get the famous "Shut up, Wesley" line, to which Dr. Crusher gets mad, and then he tells her to shut up, and so then he talks down the crystalline entity and suggests that he could prove that the Enterprise is a powerful ship by beaming a tree or something out into space, and then they destroy it, easily showing that the entity is not as powerful as it thinks, and it would back down, which is essentially it's a lie, and it's a trick. And then he goes to a console where he contacts the crystalline entity and says that you would know me by the name of Data. Then Picard okays the plan, and so he's getting on to the turbo lift, and then Tasha Yar says that maybe we should, Picard also starting to suspect something too, because he says make it so, and Data says he's confused by this, and he says do it. So then he sends a security team to go after him, and Worf is with them, and he gets on the turbo lift, and Worf enters the turbo lift, and then he emergency closes the turbo lift, and they get into a fight, which Lore is stronger than Worf, and like easily beats him. And then and during the "Shut Up, Wesley" scene, Picard tells Dr. Crusher to take Wesley to his quarters. So on the way there, Wesley had convinced Dr. Crusher to go by Data's quarters to see if it really was Lore on the ground, and he suspects that it's actually Data, and so she turns his on switch back on, and it's Data, as we already know. And he's heading to Cargo Bay 3 to stop Lore. So in the cargo bay, Lore is contacting the entity and telling the entity that that this it's all a ruse. This whole beaming a tree thing out because basically the entity feeds off of living beings, which we kind of figure that out through context clues, and then I think Lore says something to that effect earlier in the episode. And Data comes in, interrupts them, and they start to fight. To which at some point, Laura gets the phaser from Dr. Crusher, who is he's initially threatening Wesley, and he tells Dr. Crusher to leave, and Data says that he'll keep an eye on Wesley. And as she leaves, he zaps her on the arm. And it was kind of funny looking effect because as she's running out, her arm is like on fire, and she's like doing like this. And I mean, it looked. I guess it's a stunt woman, but it looked kind of funny. The way the motion. Usually, when they get zapped in the leg or the arm, it doesn't catch on fire. Their clothes don't catch on fire, But I guess they did that for a bigger effect or whatever. And so then Wesley distracts Laura or tells Wesley. Oh no, they're fighting, and Wesley's at the transporter console, and Data says to transport. He knocks Laura into the transporter, and tells Wesley to beam him out of there. So they beam him into space, and that's basically the end of the episode. There's a little bit of talk between Riker and Picard about wanting Data to be more human or less human, and it sort of ends in a kind of jokey manner, sort of like TOS. So I would say it's a good episode. It's a 7.5 out of 10 in my opinion, and it introduces Lore. This is our first introduction to Lore, who I think should have maybe been a movie villain. That once they got to the movies, because I mean, well, they did the Borg. I always sort of thought that Q should have been in the movies at some point too. They never did. And there's other great episodes with Lore. There's the one. Well, I guess it's Brothers or whatever, where they go visit soon, and Data locks out the ship and does that really long code in Picard's voice, which Red Letter Media mentions that there was a mess up in editing that they missed. Overall good episode. Introduces Lore, evil twin brother trope, but it's a good one. It's starts off as a mystery, and of course we get the famous "Shut Up, Wesley." So good on them for that. Not much else I can say about it. When they did the upgraded, when they put it into HD and did the upgraded effects, it looks a lot better. I don't have the Blu-rays. I don't because TNG's like always in reruns somewhere that I never went took the time to get the Blu-rays. Plus, they're at the time they were expensive. They're cheaper now, but now it's like you better hold on to your physical media because you never know when these streaming services are going to take something away. Obviously, Paramount's not going to take away Star Trek because that's one of their bigger properties, but look what happened to Willow on Disney Plus. Plus, I think there's been other examples. Maybe I think HBO took some stuff away. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But let's. I just want to say, or just want to address some of the comments as I get my old man glasses on. Okay, so Michelle Fairy Tales says she liked Data, but wow, was Lore really evil? I thought this was an interesting episode. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Lore's straight up evil. They don't mix any bones about it. Um, and he's a good reoccurring villain for the most part. Uh, Gavin Blackburn says hello. Uh, Shut up, Wesley. Gavin Blackburn says, yes, you can see Denise Crosby waving goodbye to people in the background in one shot. This was the last episode she shot. Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, I knew that she speaking of which, she was, I've been rewatching the X-Files on Pluto TV. All seasons, including the renewed seasons that they came out with, 10 years ago or whatever. Uh, they're all on Pluto TV for free. And there's an episode, a later season 8 episode, when Scully's pregnant and Denise Crosby is in that episode. There's also another. You see, what's her name? Lucy Lawless is in one. Uh, which I never watched Xena, Warrior Princess, but she was great in Battlestar Galactica, and she's done. She's hot and has done like full frontal nudity in, I think it was Spartacus. Uh, there's notice Aaron Paul is in one of the later seasons, so I guess that's where Vince got him from for Breaking Bad. There's a lot of good guests. Jamie Kennedy. There's a Kathy Griffin episode, and there was a moment in time where Kathy Griffin went from being like not too good looking to being hot to not too good, even worse looking because of the plastic surgery and stuff. And X Files. There's some other good. Oh, Will Sasso is in one where he plays a crippled person, which you can't do anymore because you have to be You have to be crippled actor to do that. You have to be gay to play a gay actor. You have to be, well, you have to be black to play a black. But uh, yeah, like Tom Hanks in Philadelphia would be looked down upon now because you're not. He wasn't really gay. Um, Now in Star Trek, every character is gay, and they don't seem to have a problem with it with non-gay actors playing gays, as long as they're pushing their agenda, I guess. So it's a double-edged sword, or it's, if the left didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. Anyway, I just noticed don't have my phone. I gotta go get my phone so we can see what the next episode is going to be. Michelle Fairy Tales says the Kathy Griffin episode of X Files was twin. I love the X Files. I'm glad to know it's on Pluto. Yeah, yeah, they're twins, and their fathers was like a sperm donor or something, and whenever they see each other, they create like explosions and stuff, and yeah, it's kind of I think it's like season 5 or 6. It's before we get into Mulder going missing and Doggett and Monica Reyes and all that. So once again, my job demands that I only have one day off this week, which means I can only do one episode, which is today's episode of the Red Hour this week. So I won't be back until next Wednesday. So let's see what the random generator says. So still on the same episode. Nothing crazy happened in the middle of the night. I didn't think that I missed my alarm and accidentally pressed the randomize button or whatever. So randomize again. And we're still on TNG. It's TNG Season 2, Episode 8, A Matter of Honor. So, Wharf Central? Don't remember that episode. I probably remember it if I see it, once I see it. That's the way these things work. Okay, so I'll be back next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the Red Hour, where I'll review a Matter of Honor. So until then, live long and prosper, and maybe I'll see some of y'all on Admiral Teague's in the chat or something, or Price of Reason, or who knows. So have a good night, everyone. I want to thank Gavin Blackburn, DJ Play Nice, and Michelle Fairy Tales for showing up. Anyone else lurking? Admiral Teague, speaking of, if you're out there, hello. And anyone that watches this in the future.